Hello, my name's Mark Calder. I'm the Regional Manager for Scotland and the North of England for a charity called Embrace the Middle East.
Embrace the Middle East partners with Middle East Christians who are working to transform the lives of the most marginalised and vulnerable in their communities. Our work is inspired by the invitation of Christ to care for those most in need and a commitment to support the continued social witness of Middle East Christians. Throughout the Bible, the body of Christ is called to look out for the most marginalised and vulnerable among us. Together with our partners, we seek to respond to this calling by enabling our partners to provide a long-term response to the needs around them, whether it's providing support and a future for those displaced from their homes as a result of conflict, bringing education and social interaction to children who would otherwise be isolated and cut off because of ongoing cultural stigmas around disability, enabling access to life-saving medical treatment which would otherwise be out of reach, empowering young mums to bring up healthy children, and supporting the training of the next generation of leaders, carers and teachers. The value we put on building lasting relationships with our partners is what sets Embrace apart from many other charities. These relationships allow us to build well-managed and resourced initiatives together, which empower our partners to bring the lasting change they seek in their communities. Partner with us as we live out God's call to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God.
So, first of all, I hope this message finds you all well and coping with the restrictions of the pandemic. I had originally been intending to speak to you during Lent at St Bees Priory, and the subject that Reverend Becky had given to me to talk about was justice as one of the 5 marks of mission. And as that introduction explained, Embrace the Middle East seeks to tackle the problems of poverty and injustice for people of all faiths and none in that region. But the last time I was at St Bees Priory was in November, and I just finished a 100-kilometre run on the feast day of St Bega, which had started at the Priory and finished at Carlisle Cathedral. And this was part of a year of such running pilgrimages that I had been doing. The goal was to raise awareness and funds for a new Embrace the Middle East project supporting Iraqis who had been displaced to return to their hometowns and to their livelihoods, re-establish their livelihoods in the north of that country. And when I talked about running home, as the project was called, I would always contrast the freedom that we enjoy here and that I was expressing by running across this landscape, sometimes doing 1-day runs, sometimes doing 7-day runs, with the lack of such freedom that displaced people in Iraq have had to endure. And whereas we can run more or less freely from coast to coast in any direction without fear of encountering a militia that doesn't like us or a minefield or a checkpoint, that's not true for people in places like the north of Iraq. And yet here we are in 2020 experiencing an unprecedented change in our experience of that landscape, because we're not free to move through it as I was last year. My question is whether this doesn't just teach us something about home and what it means to be at home, but whether it can also teach us something about justice.
أنا هذه الأرض استلمتها عن أبوي في حدود 40 دنم. قبل سنة في شهر 2 هذول أجوا اليهود مع تبيت اللي بيقولوا لي ناس يا زلمة اليهود في خلتك في رزقك. أجيت هون في بيطلع حوالي 30 سيارة جرافات وبواقر وسيارات حكومة وسيارات دار مدنية، إشي أبيض وإشي جيش وإشي ومعهم عمال حوالي 25 واحد. هذول معهم 3 منهم معهم مناشير على الماتور البنزين، وبيجوا على الشجرة ما بتتحمل يعني ثواني بتكون على الأرض. أنا جيت عين بصري كانهم بيقطعوا في أولادي، كانهم بيقطعوا في إيدي، فأنا بالنسبة لي يعني استكتلت على الأمر هذا. في ضابط بيقول لي شوفي قلت له شوفي ليش تقطعوا في الشجر؟ قال لي لمين الشجر؟ قلت له إلي. قال في معك وراك؟ قلت له معي ورق، أنا معي ورق، بس أنت ليش تطلب في الورق هالحين؟ أنت زي بتقول لواحد أول شيء بتشوف واحد بتطخه وبعدين بتقول له أعطيني هويتك. أنت طخيته ما بتطلب، مش بدك في هويته، أنت حاليا قطعت الشجر، شو بدك في الورق؟ قطعوا لي 150 شجرة.
That farmer clearly knows where home is for him, and yet something stirs within us when we think of situations such as the one he's experienced. Something stirs within us when we think of people being displaced from their homes, being kicked out of the houses, but certainly the towns and landscapes that have sustained and nourished them all of their lives. And something similar stirs within us when we hear stories like that, of someone who's experienced a kind of displacement in situ, where the landscape which they should be able to take for granted as their home, as part of what nourishes them and gives them fruitfulness throughout their lives, has been changed by a powerful agent, by a powerful force, and in one sense deprived them of that opportunity to dwell safely, securely and fruitfully. I wonder if we're experiencing a very small taste of something similar at present, where previously we've not had to think too much about where home is. But in the situation of lockdown, we become acutely aware of the limitations we may be experiencing. Now, for some, of course, they have ample space, they have big gardens, they are maybe in areas where they can move quite freely around their homes without encountering other people. But for those, for instance, who live in poor housing, whether that's substandard rural social housing or an inner city flat, that desire to escape is no doubt there at present. And it's that desire to escape that for Naguib Mahfouz highlights the absence of a true home. So in our society in the UK just now, and certainly globally, I think we're becoming aware that there are some fundamental injustices expressed simply in the difference between people's experience of home. Where do they have that is safe, secure, in which they can be fruitful, and in which they have no need or no desire to escape?
Here we are in the poverty belt around Beirut. So it's here where you find mainly Syrian and now Iraqis who are taking refuge in Lebanon. In this area, traffic of drug, of arms, prostitution, all kind of mischief. So the young are very exposed.
Because we live in not safe area, so the girls may have the risk of violence. It might be sexual, it might be harassment, it might be violence in their home.
So we have to train them how to protect themselves, so they can discern, they can understand that this is bad, that here I am in danger, etc., of being abused.
We work with girls aged 6 years to 18 years old. We have a morning program for the refugees who came to Lebanon recently, who couldn't register in a public school. We have 3 classes: English class, Arabic class and mathematics. And we also have the vocational training for the girls in the morning program.
Those girls have suffered a lot. We have to deal with post-traumatic stress syndrome. This is a peace heaven for them. a place where they can come, study, have entertainment, be trained to be able to cope with life difficulties.
Nehemiah chapter 5 begins, "Now there was a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish kin. For there were those who said, 'With our sons and our daughters we are many. We must get grain so that we may eat and stay alive.' There were also those who said, 'We are having to pledge our fields, our vineyards, and our houses in order to get grain during the famine.' And there were those who said, 'We are having to borrow money on our fields and vineyards to pay the king's tax.' Now our flesh is the same as that of our kindred. Our children are the same as their children. And yet we are forcing our sons and daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have been ravished. We are powerless, and our fields and vineyards now belong to others." "I was very angry," says Nehemiah, "when I heard their outcry and these complaints."
Iraqi people are returning home, but for many, their livelihoods have gone. Together, we can change this. Our Hive of Inspiration alternative gift helps Iraqi returnees start small businesses, such as setting up beehives to sell delicious honey.
If not exactly equivalent, justice seems very, very closely related to the idea of all people having a full experience of home, of having a place that they maybe share with others, but in which there is no fear, in which they can thrive, in which they can be fruitful, in which they don't have to worry about it being occupied or destroyed or by being unfairly constrained, in which they can live what God intended for them as gardeners of his sacred earth. My invitation to you on behalf of Embrace the Middle East is to participate in our work and the work of our partners, which could almost be understood as helping people to return to a full experience of home. At its most literal, that's helping refugees in the north of Iraq to return to the homes from which they were kicked out by the Islamic State. But also that farmer in the occupied West Bank, for those women and girls in the slums of southern Beirut. What they all lack is a place from which they have no need or desire to escape. We ultimately expect to have a final home as Christians, a home in the Father's house, in the spaciousness of God's generosity. But meanwhile, we can enjoy something of that generosity in this earth. My prayer is that you get to experience some of that, notwithstanding the lockdown that we're all undergoing. And it's also that you would join with us to enhance people's experience of that generosity in their own homes across the Middle East at this time. Thank you for your support.
I'm Tim Livesey. I'm here at St George's Cathedral at the centre of the Anglican Diocese of Jerusalem, which is one of our partners here in the Holy Land. It's been a week of blessing and challenge. Blessing because our partners do remarkable work here with communities and with people whose lives are disfigured by poverty, by marginalisation, and by the withholding of their basic human rights. Challenge because Christians in the Holy Land face so many odds. Declining numbers, the occupation, political deadlock, and frankly, false promises of peace in the future. They need your help. Please keep praying, visiting, campaigning, giving. Thank you very much.